Hey, Brad, thanks for being with us. Appreciate
Thank
it. I have to do a shout out to Nasdaq too. They've been a member of TechNet for a very long time, and your executive vice chairman Ed Knight is not only a longtime friend of mine, but also our chairman. So we greatly appreciate our partnership with Nasdaq. Thank you.
Excellent. And there's Ed standing up.
Ed,
So, hey, Ed.
thank you, Ed, for all of your leadership. We appreciate it. So let's dive right in. So tell us a little bit about yourself and your role at Nasdaq first, Brad.
Sure. So I joined 10 years ago. So I had a career in technology the whole time, mainly on the West Coast in Silicon Valley, but I was in telecommunications, in financial services at Charles Schwab when the web trading and internet boom happened. And then I was at eBay and PayPal. And then back to Schwab running technology in a similar role, CTO and CIO. And then 10 years ago, I said I'd never live in New York City, and I had the opportunity to come lead the technology at Nasdaq. So I did move to New York City, best thing I ever did. And we've really changed the company over that 10 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask you about next is most people think of NASDAQ as a stock exchange, but they don't really understand that you're a fully fledged technology company now. And I know that that was a huge priority of your CEO, Adina Friedman. And I want to just ask you, how has that positioned you to really lead in AI? What has that transformation at NASDAQ been like for you?
Yeah, and of course, everyone does know the NASDAQ market, and we started that, and we had one market just over 50 years ago. We also have many of the TechNet companies are NASDAQ-listed companies. So that's what everyone thinks about with NASDAQ. What has happened, though, over the we've really grown to be a global technology organization, and Adina chose those words. She had a choice of saying we're a technology-enabled financial services firm or a fintech company. And she really, when she took over as CEO over 6 years ago, thought about the strategy and said, you know, we are really a technology provider, so we're a technology company. And she was bold enough to use those words rather than, I would say, the less and kind of ambiguous fintech. You know, what is a fintech really? So I give her a lot of credit for having that vision. And what has happened over 10 years is we provide technology to, and we own and operate 27 markets in the US, Canada, and in Europe. And by being a technology running this critical infrastructure for those countries and societies, we've perfected software that when it comes time to modernize around the world, oftentimes other countries and exchanges and financial companies will say, maybe I should look at buying this rather than doing it myself. I don't have the skills. So we have become the leading provider of technology. So if you think of Salesforce or Workday, people used to build their sales systems, they used to build their financial and accounting systems. Now you buy it because it's a much better system, and it's across a much wider group of folks. That's what we are. Some people don't know that piece of it. And then the other thing that happened during that time was really the modernization of infrastructure, and really I'm talking about cloud and financial services, and even more so financial services in other countries. Cloud has been adopted very slowly. NASDAQ has been on the lead of cloud adoption. So we have taken regulated systems. We've worked with our regulators to get in Europe and in the U.S. with the SEC to get cloud infrastructure to be something that is accepted, and we pioneered that. It turns out that positioned us very well because that's where the AI revolution is happening. It's really happening on top of a cloud foundation of data.
Got it. And what's your approach to AI with respect to your customers and also your employees?
Yeah, if you're talking to, it's a helpful way we've come up with this separation of how you think about where you use AI. We have been, for over 6 years, we've had an AI team that is looking at the use of AI in our products. And so we think about it, we like that little nuance of AI in your product. So there, you heard some of the product managers on the prior panel, and they're thinking about how do they differentiate, how do they make their product better. The other one is AI on the business, so in the product on the business. And here you have the ability to just amplify your employees. So how do you make their jobs more meaningful? And there's a lot of drudgery in a lot of our jobs. So some of this is really augmenting your employees so that they can do more of what they really like about it. So two areas we see great applicability on the business are for our engineers, and we're almost half the company are engineers building these technology products. There's drudgery in documenting the code you write. So think about the generative AI. If you saw those Venn diagrams, the generative AI has great promise for testing code better. That's a drudgery part of engineering, for documenting it, for turning it over to more junior engineers as you want to move on to more sophisticated things, and training. It's just a wonderful learning. It's a very iterative way of learning. So we see anyone that generates content, which engineers, it really is a content generation profession, as is marketing, and as we have a regulatory and compliance group. So lawyers generate a lot of content, they do a lot of research, and they do a lot of summarization. Turns out generative AI is really wonderful at summarization.
Got it. And how does AI impact your customers? How do you feel that you see it most impacting those who are listed on your exchanges?
Yeah, so for our customers, that as evidenced by the prior panel, just about everyone that's a technology company, everyone that's most of the Nasdaq listed companies, we have a lot of the biotech firms. So I think you made some comments in your intro about just where we think this can benefit human health and solving serious problems there. So I would say the biotech firms, the medical service industry is going to benefit greatly. And then the technology companies and banks, anyone that has to deal with bad behavior on their platform or fighting fraud. And Katya had a lot of great examples there about how it's related to fraud. For us, that's one of the other areas that I'll talk about, that Nasdaq has gotten into that area, and we also agree and share Katya's views on how that can cause problems and really thwart a lot of the criminals on the other side that are using this technology as well.
Got it. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, the anti-fraud, detection that you use at Nasdaq?
Yeah. So one of the areas that we found was important for well-functioning regulated markets was rule following, and we have a product. We're the leading provider of trade surveillance, and so there you're looking for most everyone follows the rules. But the folks that don't follow the rules have an amplified effect on all of us that are following the rules. So you want to root them out. And we have a trade surveillance product that looks for patterns. It finds alerts, and people then use those for investigative follow-up. In 2021, we bought a company out of St. John's, Newfoundland, and 3 founders, engineers, came up with a way to also fight fraud for small banks, credit unions, in predominantly Canada, but we're able to expand to the U.S. And so we now have paired the surveillance technology with our anti-financial crime technology that is helping banks. It was helping originally small banks look like big banks in fighting fraud. And I can talk a little bit more about the techniques and why AI is such an important part of that.
Yeah, please do. Tell us more about that.
All right. So if you think about you're someone that is perpetuating a financial fraud, and it can be it can be trying to counterfeit checks. It can be wire transfers, things like that. If you're a small bank, you barely have a technology team. And the different groups are going to go from small entity to small entity. And Verafin was able to get all of the transaction data for over 2,400 customers, put it in a consistent format, and get consent. And there's also in the U.S. and Canada, you can share data for fighting fraud. So when we think about that theme about let's make sure that we don't have blanket regulations that say you can't use this technology. Let's make sure that for fighting fraud, for fighting cyber, criminals, for making our systems more resilient, those are applications that we should apply it as aggressively as possible. So they were enabled by the advent of the cloud, and they made the choice not to put their software on premise, but to get their customers to be comfortable with the security and having their transactions live in the cloud. They had the ability to use this data in a consortium fashion to look for patterns across, and it was permissioned in. So if you think about the power, the company can opt out, but they're not going to get the benefit of seeing 2,400 other entities' patterns. And this became one of the most effective ways to fight all those things that I talked about: wire fraud, check problems, using techniques that are AI generated. So computer vision to see when someone has tried to counterfeit a check. Using machine learning, which we heard about before, to really look for the patterns and detect when someone is sending. And if you think about wire fraud, is about not necessarily who's sending it, but who's receiving it. So if you look to that and see the patterns, that this is a bad endpoint, you can actually do quite a good job of eliminating wire fraud. And then more importantly, it's just being quick. So someone may get burned, but you get great feedback, because if someone loses money, the model is going to be very accurate, because you're going to tell the bank, I got ripped off. So this feedback loop is really important in AI, the ability to fine tune and jump on a new trend. So the company we bought that's now part of us is called Verifin. And right during the pandemic, so we bought them in 2021, they could see a lot of the payment scams that were coming out that were pandemic related. And by having this technology, you can see that quickly. You can start to protect your 2,400 companies, banks, financial institutions much more rapidly.
Got it. And, a lot of people might think, well, I'm not a bank, or, so any of this wire transfer fraud or transaction fraud doesn't affect me. Should people think of that differently? Is there a human impact of being able to clamp down on this kind of fraud and abuse?
Yeah, and that's what we were really impressed with. The folks we have that work in this area, when we looked at the motivation, they kind of took it to the why. So why are they in this business? Why do they feel so strongly about building it? And what you see the root cause is this is at the root of these financial payment frauds and things like that is elder abuse. There's human trafficking, and as we heard with the pandemic, there was also scams, just opportunistic scams. So they see themselves as crime fighters. So that at the root of this, the AI is used. It just manifests itself and shows up the evidence in a financial transaction. But if you go back a couple steps, there is someone that is being impacted, and if we can narrow the opportunity for the criminals to actually get paid, they move on to other opportunities. So we have to use it everywhere. If we move it out of this area, they'll look for another opportunity. I love to use the mobile phone example. So I was in telecom when there was 1G, so we're at 5G moving to 6G. And you used to drive from the East Bay into San Francisco, and you'd go over Treasure Island. There were a group of people with scanners, and your phone would get cloned every time. You couldn't go over the Bay Bridge without your phone cloned. And we put in 2G, we put in a brand new network, and those phones came with SIM cards. And if you think about it, it moved all those fraudsters to pretty much ATM fraud. So, and then it took another 20 years in the United States for us to get the chips in our cards. Europe had it sooner. So this technology, that's a great example of saying that, and it's hard to give the credit card industry, you had to change out all the readers and things like that, but the mobile phone industry didn't have the ability to make customers okay with fraud, so they had to solve it technologically. So maybe that's a good call to action for timing. If the technology's there and it can be used and people can get comfortable that we're going to be using it in a responsible way, let's move faster and let's move swiftly.
Got it. Thank you. How do you think that the private sector and government can work together to ensure that we move as quickly as possible to clamp down on fraud?
So we of course operate. There's some constructs that work. Nasdaq has a SRO, a self-regulatory organization. Mm-hmm. So there's is it Matsumi? Is that? Yeah, so I think he said it best, this notion of this is a tool and we're going to it's going to amplify who we are. We're going to show up in the how the AI is used in our business for our customers, and ultimately, are we doing it in the way that we're proud of? So I would say there's a great opportunity to balance. There's responsibility. So this self-regulatory organization, the set of rules, it started with people pledging to do it right. So that's a great step. And then there's, I would say, something we don't want to do is have a patchwork of 50 different rules by state. Mm. So there's a great opportunity to collaborate globally for fighting fraud. So I would say that, but that's not easy these days. So let's at least start doing it, in the U.S. With Canada, with Mexico, and get it right there if possible.
Right. And in your opinion, is AI a force for good?
Yeah, absolutely. And just like any technology, and folks mentioned that earlier, it will be applied by the evil side equally. So I would say the businesses that are public companies have responsibility. They are held to a higher standard. I think we can take the good, and there's tremendous amount of good to be had for companies using it, and then we have to narrow in how we prevent the criminals from having a free reign of just using it for amplifying their deeds. Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to ask you one just sort of last question, too, that I've sort of been thinking about lately. In some instances, we see that, AI can be used for bad if it gets into the wrong hands or used for nefarious purposes. And, there are people who are going to do those things, in any instance. But in some instances, AI can detect AI. AI is good at finding other AI that's trying to trick the system, so to speak. And are you seeing that kind of ability in your sphere with anti-fraud?
Yeah, so there's actually an AI technique that does that. Mm-hmm. So that's how it improves. It has one side of it is trying to do a fake, and the other one is detecting it. Mm-hmm. And it's pretty brilliant because it improves its ability, and oftentimes this is used for image recognition. So that's the simplest thing. So if you think about it, you do want to have it, but it is really just it's one of the more popular algorithms in machine learning, mm-hmm. and it's called generative adversarial networks. So it even has the adversary on it, but it's really used to improve the algorithm.
So overall, you feel like AI will have a positive effect on your company, but also overall in society?
Yeah, I do, and I would end one more on the way that this is that things like ChatGPT have been made available. Mm-hmm. And we also, the fellow from Google, I saw he left already, but there was a language model that Google open sourced in 2019 called BERT that we were able to use. So I do believe the way that that companies are open sourcing things, they're making it very widespread. The access to it, I would say anyone that didn't raise their hand till they've used one of these tools, and tried it. It's free, it's available, and it's worth just getting a better understanding of it. So that, I think, is going to be a difference in just how people can engage and learn across the world. There's going to be a lot of positives from that.
Thank you so much for taking time to be with us
bet.
today. We so appreciate you lending your expertise.
And congrats on your announcement yesterday.
Thank you. Appreciate it.